Hello and welcome to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and this evening I will be doing a dual review for Grass and Raising the Stones by Sheri S. Tepper. I said dual and not a series review because while these two books are technically part of a trilogy, the Arbai trilogy, you really can read them as standalones and they are only, I'd say, loosely connected to one another. Now, before I read these two novels, I had read another novel by Sheri S. Tepper, The Gate to Women's Country, which is also available in the Science Fiction Masterworks collection, and I had thoroughly enjoyed it, so I was quite excited to get to these two, and I was not disappointed. I really enjoyed both. And they are connected thematically at least, but they are fairly different stories as well. Both of these novels are, as their presence in the SF Masterworks collection might indicate, science fiction novels. Straight up science fiction, though I will say there are slightly more mystical, fantastical elements in Raising the Stones. But in any case, Grass tells the fairly straightforwardly linear story of a team of humans from Earth going to the planet Grass, where they hope to find a cure for a plague that's scaring around all the planets Terrans have so far colonized. In addition to that, a new religion has taken hold over human society and has a lot of political power, and it's called Sanctity, and it's basically Christianity on steroids, I guess, though like Old Testament type Christianity, because there's no mention of Jesus or anything like that, but it's kind of modeled off the Catholic Church, though the traditional Catholic Church still exists. And this religious institution controls a lot of things, has actually put a stop to human expansion into space, and they're the ones who actually commission a team to go to Grass to try and find a cure for the plague, though they have ulterior motives. And this team is basically made up of a married couple and their two kids, and those are the main characters, and more specifically the woman, the wife, called Marjorie Westriding, who is of British descent, her husband is of Spanish descent, and they are both old school Catholics. And they're sent to Grass basically, one, because Marjorie's husband is the nephew of the leader of Sanctity, their religious leader, and two, because they used to be professional equestrians, they won Olympic medals, and the particularity about Grass is that they have a society divided into two castes, a lower class and an upper, which participate in these weird hunts. And they live on these isolated estates called estancias. There are villages attached to these estates. And then there's like this big, somewhat city in the middle of a swamp. And you actually quickly realize that the lower class isn't actually inferior or oppressed economically. They're actually very well off. They're educated. They function very well on their own. But the noble people on these estates have been so isolated and locked into their self-importance that they think they're superior to everyone else. And they participate in these weird hunts, which involve horses, mounts, hounds, and foxes, but there's a twist to that. So that's the basic premise. The family is sent there to figure things out with those hunts. Why is it that the people on Grass don't get sick from this horrible plague for which there is no known cure, etc. etc. And then you have Raising the Stones. Like I said, it's only loosely connected to Grass. There is a clear connection, which I won't mention because spoilers. But so in this one, you start the story off on a planet called Hobbsland. Now, I'm guessing this takes place centuries later than the storyline in Grass, but it's never made terribly clear. Humans exist in this planetary system called the System. And there are like 3 main planets and a bunch of asteroids where you have farm worlds. And one of these farming colonies is called Hobbsland because it was bought and leased by a dude called Mysore Hobbs. And on Hobbsland used to live a native species of intelligent aliens that died off pretty quickly after humans first settled there. And there are these gods there. Gods that grow out of the soil and make people live cooperatively and in relative harmony. And the main character there, or at least one of the main characters, is called Samasnya Jurat, and he and his mum emigrated to Hobbsland from a place called Volstad on the planet Arbai, and Volstad is like Again, monotheistic religion on crack, probably more influenced by Islam than Christianity, though you can kind of see both in there. And it's extremely violent, it relies on slavery, very misogynistic, exploitative, etc., etc. And they annoy every other planetary society, by the way, which is kind of amusing. But no one really wants to touch them because, oh, religious freedom, we've got to let them do their thing. So Sam's mum took him and his sister out of there to Hobbsland when they were very little. And he wants to reconnect with his dad. And then you have also his son and his son's cousin who get embroiled in the emergent religion on Hobbsland with these god things that grow out of the soil. And you also have to know that Sam wants to rekindle his relationship with his father because on Hobbsland the organization is matrilineal, so there is no recognition of fathers or sons. You have children as a woman and children have progenitors. And uncles. Uncles take the place of the father in matrilineal societies. And so there's political intrigue, there's all these planetary systems embroiled in this with what's going on in Hobbsland and what's going on in Volstad on Arbai, because they want to, of course, conquer the other planets and extend their slavering ways and their violence. It's basically a death cult, but I'll get back to that. So, writing-wise, I really, really enjoyed Sheri S. Tepper's writing style. I think there's something very beautiful about it. There's something about the way she describes, like, grass, for example. She really brings it to life in a vivid fashion. It's inspiring, it's so delicate and pretty, but it doesn't get too flowery either. She keeps it concise and precise where it needs to be, but then she also allows herself to embroider on the description of a particular setting. I mean, the beginning of the novel Grass just paints a brilliant picture of the planet, of these expanses of differently coloured grasses and how they sway in the wind under the sun with the differently coloured sky, all the creatures she creates. I don't know, it was really brought to life. I could picture it easily in my mind. I really enjoyed that, and I wrote down several quotes from both books in my book, so there's something about it that really clicked with me. And another stylistic structural decision she took, which I enjoyed, is that there are multiple points of view. There are like a couple of main characters, but you do shift from like different secondary characters to major characters, to even sometimes like a couple of characters you're not even gonna meet again, but just to give you a flash into an event that's going to influence on another more major event in the overall, storyline. So yeah, multiple points of view that blend together seamlessly. Now, when it comes to character work, I would say both novels display a varied cast of fairly well-realized characters. As I said, there are multiple points of view, so you do spend quite a bit of time with all of the major characters, and you do get to know them fairly well. In Grass, I mentioned there is one main protagonist, Marjorie Westriding, who, tries to do good, tries to atone for her sins because she is Catholic and she really believes in her faith. She doesn't feel very comfortable around people. That's what I got from reading her chapters, but she does feel very comfortable with horses. Horses are her life. She's an equestrian by, not profession, but she was an Olympic medalist. And she tries to do good. She does charity work, but her whole arc in the book is basically questioning all of that, questioning the teachings of the church, questioning her role as a wife, as a mother, because she isn't in a happy marriage. Her husband, I don't think, is just purely an asshole. He's just a very fiery man, a passionate man who cannot stick to one woman and needs to possess his partner, basically, needs to own them. But I want to make it clear that it's not portrayed in a I hate men fashion. And I say this because Sheri S. Tepper is also known to be a feminist science fiction writer, because her daughter is described as having the same type of personality as him, so I don't think it's a misandrous thing at all. It's just a personality thing. And she's close to her son, not to her daughter, so she has a hard time fitting in her family, and she's questioning all of that. And there are also a couple of priests in her household, one of whom is a lot more open-minded, the other one is a lot more old-fashioned and a traditionalist. So she questions things and ends up on a path, I would say, personal liberation and most importantly, mental liberation, having a freer will, a freer mind, things like that. Another important character, I would say, is Willoughby. Willoughby is an acolyte of sanctity, this religion I mentioned. Now, he didn't have a choice in becoming an acolyte. He was basically ripped from his family, which died of plague, unfortunately, and put into sanctity as an acolyte. He was told, you got to do this for 15 years and then you're good to go. Fortunately, before the 15 years were up, he kind of lost it and was sent to Grass, because on Grass there's like a monastery for rebellious acolytes, and the acolytes and pseudo-priests there have to work on Grass to repent. And Willoughby is always thinking about his family. His family wasn't even Catholic or Christian. It seemed to be a bit pagan, because they might have been descendants of Native Americans or something like that. They've lived very close to nature on like a little ranch. And the father did pottery, so he misses trees. He thinks about trees all the time, and his story is about finding a home, finding a place in the world, and that's also a well-realized arc. In Raising the Stones, the character parallel to Marjorie West Riding, in my opinion, would probably be Samaznia Jarrat, or Sam, but I will say there are also like a couple of other main characters. The scale is a bit bigger, a bit larger than in Grass. So like I said, Sam, his sister and his mum escaped sort of from Volstad, this horrifically violent, slave-owning, misogynistic, religious nation on the planet Arbai, to Hobbsland to start a new life. But Sam remembers his dad. His little sister, not really, she adapted fine. But he keeps asking his mother, why did we leave Volstad? Was my father such a bad man? He just cannot accept the religion of these people, the society of these people, that it could be that bad, that violent, that warmongering. And so he's looking for something. He's looking for his own father, really, but for something. He looks into the old legends of Earth, and he creates these old bound books, and goes around wearing a sword belt and a helmet, and he's seeking these old legends of heroes and kings. So his arc is one of memory, of seeking one's origins, of coming to terms with one's origins, and accepting that there's some things you cannot change, accepting that some things are the way you've been told, and you have to look for fulfillment and your place in the world somewhere else, somehow else. So it was a really interesting story arc, but also very frustrating. There's several times where you want to take him and shake him like, dude, stop! Listen to your mum, she knows what she's talking about. Like, even when he's confronted with the truth of violence, of horrific acts, he's like, oh, but I'm sure my dad wasn't aware of this, and he's not like that, he's different. It was so annoying. Then you have the characters of Jep and Saturday. And Jep is actually Sam's biological son, and Saturday is Jep's cousin. And they're both young teens, and they get involved with these Hobbsland god things which grow out of the soil, and they need these little temples that the community on Hobbsland, or one of the communities, one of the settlements, start building. So these little temples were there before the humans arrived. Like I said, there was like a native species of aliens called the Albrit, and then they died and had these little temples. And then the god that remained from those people died, but some human children were compelled to rebuild one of these temples and bring in something in that temple. And it started doing things to the community. At the center of that are these two kids, Jep and Saturday, and they become like the stewards of this god entity, or one of the pairs of stewards. And they get involved in Sam's storyline because they go to Volstad, and there's a whole thing with that. And that was interesting. I'm not really sure how to qualify their arc, because they seem very wise for their young age, because they become these religious figures in a way, these sorts of priests and priestesses. And so they gain a lot of wisdom, but at the same time you can sense that they don't really understand what's going on. They just accept it. They submit themselves to like the collective wisdom of these organisms and the community, and making it all work somehow. Now, world building wise, as you can probably tell, I've tried to keep the spoilers to a minimum, and I'm going to try and continue that here. So we have Grass. I was actually quite happy with the world building overall. It wasn't perfect by any means, but the planet of Grass as a self-contained ecosystem was fairly well realized. There were a couple of surprises that I liked, I found interesting. Some I actually kind of called ahead. I was like, I bet this is what that's going to be, and I was right. But then there was a twist on that. I was like, oh, I didn't expect that one. That was cool. As the name might imply, grass is a planet covered in grasses. Lots of them, all colours imaginable, all shapes and sizes. There are a few trees. The trees grow where there's water, basically. I guess the planet is covered in aquifers, and trees and swamps sprout out of those areas. And like I said, there's a big city in the middle of one of these big swamp forests. I'm not really sure if that could actually exist, but it's still, believable. And like I said, she does a great job of just bringing this to life with beautiful, vivid descriptions, so that was really neat. I really felt I was on grass. The other big part of the world building was sanctity, and there are a couple of these planets that have been colonized by humans that are mentioned. It's all, relatively run-of-the-mill science fiction stuff. It's a very small interplanetary system. Like I said, the expansion of that system has been curtailed by the authority of this sanctity religious entity, and that was also well realized. Like I said, it does seem to be Christianity, Catholicism on steroids, without a Jesus figure. Basically, sanctity believes that they will be able to resurrect every human being based on the fact they have a genetic sample from every human being. So they will be able to clone those bodies, and they say, oh, the souls of these people will get back in those bodies somehow. But like I said, old Catholicism also still exists. But getting back to grass, there are these creatures. Like I said, there is a caste-based society on it, sort of. You have the lower serving class, or is it? No, not really. That's an interesting twist on that. You have these noble people, the bonds, on these estates, estancias, who live in fairly isolated conditions, but also fairly luxurious and lavish conditions. There's a village of common people attached to each estate, and then there's this city in the middle of a big swamp forest. The people living in the city have contact with the outside world, the outside universe. They had trade with other planets. They have schools, they have technology. Those people live very comfortably. So they're not a lower class in any sense of the word, really. They're not peasants or anything, but they are considered peasants by the Bonds because the Bonds live in isolation. They think they're so special because they're descended from minor petty noblemen from Europe centuries past. And so they're full of themselves. But in fact, they're nothing special. And so they have this weird custom of the hunt, which involves mounts, hounds, and foxes, or foxen. They're not really hounds, mounts, or foxes. You get that right. I mean, it's not really a spoiler because you understand that very quickly. They're described in like the first chapter, and you're like, yeah, no, those are not Terran animals, are they? Not by a long shot. They're very strange alien creatures, and there's a whole plot with them. Like, this book almost reads as a mystery novel in a certain way, which I really loved. I thought it was a bit different. And so there's the whole biology of these creatures, the intrigue with the biology of these creatures, and they were really well realized. I really enjoyed that. And finally, the plague element, that was probably the weakest of the plot. It's kind of a MacGuffin. It's there to give a convenient, start for the plot. They need to find a cure for that weird plague. And I'm like, also, the way the plague is described, it's some pretty horrific stuff with limbs rotting off and things like that. But then it doesn't spread like wildfire. And I'm like, if it's that horrible, you'd think it would be burning through entire populations a lot faster than it actually does in the novel. And so now in Raising the Stones, like I said, it is technically a sequel to Grass, but it's very loosely connected. There is one specific element which shows up in Raising the Stones. You're like, oh yes, I see what that is. Interesting. My best guess is the story in Raising the Stones takes place hundreds, thousands of years later than the story in Grass. I mean, it's hard to tell ultimately, but something like that. Because you have these humans living in a planetary system which has nothing to do with Earth, and Earth is referred to as man-home, which suggests it was left behind a long, long time ago, right? But that system is well realized. The structure of it, politically, militarily speaking, the different cultures on the different planets, doesn't go into much depth, mind you, sure, but it's sketched out fairly well overall. Now you have the Hobbslands, God, then gods, which, like I said, are things that grow out of the ground, and it was different. It was fairly original, actually, so you can make up your mind fairly quickly. Again, this is not really a spoiler because it's made apparent early on in the book. They're not really gods, they're some type of organism, something akin to fungus, but it bends reality and does things, and the people refer to them as gods, and apparently the alien species which lived on Hobbsland previously to the arrival of humans worshipped them as gods. So it kind of begs the question, what are gods? What is religion? But I'll get to that in a second. You have the religion in Volstad. Like I said, in my opinion, it takes its cues from Islam in a way, but also Christianity. It's like monotheistic religion on crack. You thought sanctity was bad? Holy crap, is the religion of Volstad 1,000 times worse. It glorifies violence, death, slavery, misogyny, etc., etc. It's basically Daesh, right? I mean, honestly, it's a death cult. It's like Daesh, 100%. These people believe they must wipe out all the infidels and they'll end up in paradise with virgins. So, I mean, that's the callback to Islam, but the death cult aspect is like Daesh. So that was interesting to read about. And they do terror acts, yes, and they take slaves and they chop heads off. And the women are veiled from head to toe. So yeah, I mean, you can clearly see the influences there. So yeah, overall, it might be shallower world building because the scale, like I said, is a bit larger, it's a bit greater, but it's still overall well realized for like a standalone-ish novel of like under 500 pages. It's not great, of course, but it's good, it's solid. So I would have liked a clearer link between the two novels. I said they are part of what is called the Arbai trilogy, and so I will quickly mention what are the Arbai supposed to be. Again, it's not really a spoiler. The Arbai are this alien species which had colonized a lot of planets before humans had gotten to them. And they are mentioned directly in Grass, not really in Raising the Stones. And they seem to be reptilian humanoids. And they left ruins and gates that could allow for teletransportation between worlds, which you don't have in Grass, but you definitely have those. They're called doors in Raising the Stones, which allow for instantaneous travel between planets or between cities. So maybe that's the link, but still, I would have liked, apart from that one specific mention, which was like, oh, neat, something a bit clearer linking the two. So the obvious overarching theme, or themes, of these two novels are religion, primarily, but then also I would say the environment. I wonder if Sheri S didn't consider herself an eco-feminist specifically. I think there's a bit of that going on. But religion and nature, the environment, and the relationship between the two, how religion gives arguments that justify exploiting other humans, women, and of course, the natural world. But religion in and of itself. And again, at first glance, you might think, oh, she's like, religion, bad. But in Raising the Stones, you do have these Hobbsland gods. And a religion is born from that, which seems pretty nice, pretty positive, pretty hippy-dippy. So, no, she's not trashing religion, but she's questioning what it is, what it can be, its role in society, in shaping society, how it can constrain individuals, but how it can also foster hope and community in a way. So it's not all negative by any means. It's an interesting exploration of religion, honestly. So no, I really enjoyed that. I wrote a fair few quotes in direct relation to the theme of religion. It did make me think. And so the environment, the exploitation of the environment, and how the environment can also shape religion, because the Hobbsland gods are a type of fungus thing that grow out of the ground. So things like that, how the environment shapes our faith, our belief systems. It's all interdependent and interconnected, basically. There's also an exploration of free will, which is obviously tied into the overarching theme of religion. Free will, self-determination, because obviously religion can dictate human conduct. So that can, constrain one's understanding of free will. I have to follow these tenets, this doctrine, and not, think outside the box and maybe act a bit differently, which is obviously negative. But But then, in Raising the Stones, you have this organism which is creating this new religion. And it seems overwhelmingly positive, but there is a questioning of, yeah, but isn't that still wrong because these people seem to be manipulated by it? And in fact, that is one of the plot lines. People from the planet Thika have a religion which worships free will in a weird way, the freedom of thought, the unimpeded mind. They call that the overmind. But basically, you cannot tamper with a person's mind. You have to let them be free to think whatever they want and feel whatever they want. So some of them feel threatened by the Hobbslands god because it seems like that thing is manipulating the thoughts and actions of the people living there, even though the outcome seems overwhelmingly positive. People are happier, are more peaceful, are more cooperative, and they aren't being fundamentally changed in their personalities either. So what's going on there? Is it still acceptable, though? Because two of the main characters, Jet and Saturday, want to export that god stuff to other planets. But what if the people don't want that? Even if the outcome is overwhelmingly positive, can you really impose that upon others? Isn't that impeding with their right to self-determination? Things like that. Now, more specifically, in Grass, religion is really approached from the point of view of just questioning it. Questioning its negative influences, its negative roles in society. You've got sanctity, which controls a lot of things on a lot of the planets humans have colonized. But you also have these old Catholics, which are surviving somehow. And you've got Marjorie West Riding, who is a believer, and she's coming to doubt a lot of what she's been taught about her faith, about guilt, about the concept of sin, carnality, and yeah, she wants to be freer. Because she realizes these religious tenets aren't making her happy, aren't making her contented. It's not going to fix her marriage. It's not going to fix her. So there is a more overt rejection of the oppressive qualities of religion, of its capacity to keep people down, to keep people locked into very limited patterns of thinking. There's a very direct discussion, perhaps a bit too heavy-handed, of like the concept of original sin, collective guilt, collective inaction, and responsibility. In Raising the Stones, you have this interesting contrast between Vorstad, which is even worse than what Sanctity was, which is an actual death cult, and then the Hobbslands gods. You also have this like third element of the ancestral spirits of the Garm, which is this species which was wholesale enslaved by Volstad. And they're like diminutive humanoids which have some fur on their backs and heads. And they worshipped ancestral spirits, a very animistic type of religion with animal spirits, clan spirits, etc. So you are presented with two outcomes of religion on society. The overwhelmingly negative one, which glorifies death, oppression, exploitation, to glorify the one god, the one prophet, the one sex, of course, the male sex. But then also this spiritual religious system that fosters community, encourages being cooperative, being peaceful, being kind and friendly to one another. And also the religion of the Garm, which is ancestral spirits. And they're very peaceful. They're like, I don't know why, but they make me think of Ewoks for some reason, but they're not really like that, but I don't know. Just friendly, diminutive humanoids, which are peaceful and they've been abused horrendously. And you just want to root for them and hug them. So religion isn't necessarily bad. That's why I want to make it clear, Sheri S. Tepper isn't trashing religion wholesale. She just is questioning the phenomenon and its role in human society, in shaping the human psyche and shaping human relationships with one another and with the world around them. So it was an interesting contrast. I mean, it's a contrast of extremes, to be fair. I mean, on the one hand, you've got an extremely violent, monotheistic, patriarchal religion, and on the other, you've got a weird, fungus-based, hippie, we love each other, we're all super nice to one another religion. So it's a bit black and white, but still, the contrast is interesting, and it does make you think. It fosters thought, and that is always a good thing in my book. And now I'll read a few quotes I took out from these novels. Then you know that with very small things, we cannot both know where they are and what they are doing. Perhaps God does not look at us individually, because to do so would interrupt our work, interfere with our free will. That's the nature of teaching. Something happens and intelligence first apprehends it, then makes up a rule about it, then tries to pass the rule along. Very small beings invariably operate in that way. However, by the time the information is passed on, new things are happening that the old rule doesn't fit. Eventually, intelligence learns to stop making rules and understand the flow. Too good is good for nothing. A chisel has to have an edge, my dear. Otherwise, it simply stirs things around without ever cutting through to causes and realities. It breathes of brooding pregnancies awaiting birth, monstrous winged truths lying coiled and glimmering in wombs of shadow, ready to erupt at any moment. Such nights need no moon, being lit by their own quiescence. As with other peoples who had focused their lives upon wrongs in the past and heaven in the future, Volstad made an everlasting hell of the present. And no matter how much well-meaning ecumenicists pretended all the gods were one god under different aspects, they weren't any such thing, because every prophet created God in his own image to confront his own nightmares. Man neither merits joy nor earns pain, nor will he learn from either alone, though if his race lives long enough, he may be informed by both concerning the nature of what is. There is no sin inherent in any mind save the sin of pride in believing one has seen or been taught the absolute truth. The second greatest sin is refusing to search for the truth one must acknowledge one will never absolutely find. That's what legends are for, to give us anchoring places in time. If we have them, here and there we go in our minds, knowing this story and that, putting our web to this and that, spinning and spinning, until, when we are done, we are all bound together in the same pattern. Conspiracy is dark and dirty, and vengeance is heavy as rock. And being a slaver presses a man down until he can see nothing but black dirt around him, like the walls of a grave. Men become accustomed to that darkness when they are in the habit of death. It pains such men to come into the light. Often the laws are unjust and cause great pain. The men are willing to trade justice for the law, because they can make the law, but they can only approach justice. And that concludes my dual review for Grass and Raising the Stones by Sheri S. Tepper. I hope you found it interesting. Please do share your thoughts down in the comments below. In the meantime, I hope you will have a lovely day, evening, whichever time of day you prefer, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye!